they are still carrying those memories. That man did not do as well. That is how they address you, and that is human beings for you. But when God looks at you, he addresses you by your future, because your future is in his hands. If there is anyone who knows you more than all of us combined, if there is anyone who knows your tomorrow better than anybody else, it is Jehovah God. Because you know what he told Jeremiah? Before I formed you in your mother's womb, I knew you, and I consecrated you to be a prophet unto the nations. That means that even before you begin to manifest in the prophetic gifting, even before you begin to manifest under the grace that God has given you, God already knows you by what he has deposited on the inside of you. God understands your potential. God understands your capabilities. He does not need to refer to your last certificate to know what you can do and what you cannot do. God does not need a recommendation from your last employer to understand your capabilities and your capacity. God does not need a recommendation from your boss to know whether you can perform in that job or not. God knows you in and out. He knows the potential within you. He knows what he has built on the inside of you. He knows the software. He knows the hardware. He knows the applications that are within your life. And when he looks at you, he addresses you by your tomorrow. He addresses you by your destiny and not by your history. God will never address you by your failure. He will always address you by your greatness. While the devil addresses you by your last sin, God addresses you by your identity in him. God will call you out like he called a man called Gideon. And he called him a mighty man of valor. And Gideon was living below the poverty line. He was just a laborer, a casual worker. You know, a man who was looking for many jobs. He was of the poorest of the poorest. That even the poor used to call him poor, because their family was the smallest and he was the poorest in their family. Their clan was the most less privileged, or was the least privileged. And they were living in great poverty, abject poverty, in squalor, in failure. But when God looked at the boy Gideon, he called him mighty man of valor. That God is the one I am talking about. I'm not talking about any other God you have heard from men. I am not talking about any other God you have heard from your neighbors. I am talking about that God who addresses you by your future and addresses you by your destiny and not by your history. The Bible says in Isaiah